Hello everyone, Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Chase Terwilliger, CEO of Balanced Health Botanicals, which is a parent company of CBDistillery. Chase Terwilliger. I got it right?
You got it right. Yeah. One of the few.
Before we recorded, I know that I had to ask you before I almost butchered it. So I'm glad that I got that right. Perfect. We're off to a good start. So how are you, man?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. I'm just back from my vacation, but really it was my wedding and honeymoon. So we were in Mexico for almost 2 weeks. And it was just a magical, beautiful time. So I'm getting back into work mode and have a lot of podcasts scheduled, but still coming off that high, you know.
Congratulations. So you're newlywed.
Newlywed, yes, and it feels great, you know. So
Good.
schedule due to COVID, obviously, like other couples had to do, but we made it work. So
Congrats.
yes, thank you. So Chase, for those who are listening, we have Chase on. He's the CEO of Balanced Health Botanicals. It's a parent company of CBDistillery. Before we jump into Balanced Health Botanicals and even CBDistillery, Chase, why don't you start by just letting the audience get to know who you are, your background, and how you made your way into the cannabis industry?
Yeah. So I started off my career in healthcare, specifically medical devices. Worked for Johnson & Johnson for a few years, and then got my MBA at Arizona State, and then moved back to Colorado. I went to undergrad here in Colorado, and started a distributorship, medical device distributorship. So we actually sold to surgeons. We'd go into procedures and sell them different types of tools and instruments, and like bone implants was our specialty. We ended up selling that distributorship to Johnson & Johnson. Once I got out of that, I took my beating in the medical device world and said, I want to get into technology. And so I joined, there was just one founder and me at the time, a brand new idea called Silver Nest. It's a roommate matching platform for baby boomers and empty nesters, still around today. And and that was in 2015, and we grew that for a couple of years. We had some great funding and some great partners. One of them being 500 Startups. It's a group out of San Francisco, and it's a really cool design where they bring kind of 50 of their portfolio companies all under one roof, and then they bring in all their LPs to really educate those companies on whatever they may need. And so right when I got out of that program, I met this group of guys that were selling CBD. I had no idea what CBD was. And they said, hey,
what year was this, Chase?
Yeah, so this was at the end of 2016.
Okay.
Yep. And so this was Black Friday of 2016. Just got back from going to San Francisco for this 500 Startups. And this group of friends said, hey, we just put up this little website, and we just did $100,000 in sales in 1 week. And I'm like, excuse me, I'm commuting from Vail to San Francisco with my young children at home, and you guys are doing it, and we can't even pull those numbers on Silver Nest, and you guys did $100,000 in sales. So they had me come in as a consultant, and I didn't know if it was snake oil or what it was. I really wasn't familiar with it at all, but I had a degree in physiology and healthcare background, so I kind of started to understand it, picking up rocks, trying to figure out what CBD actually did. And early 2017, then January, we started getting the testimonials back, and it was changing people's lives, their friends' lives. They were telling their friends about it, and their children's lives too. And that was where I, had to make the tough decision to leave Silver Nest and join CBDistillery, which is now Balanced Health Botanicals, full time at the beginning of 2017.
So having that background in healthcare and physiology, and then as you started to discover CBD, learning about how cannabinoids, marry with our endocannabinoid system, were you shocked when you was that like a revelation for you, or had you heard about some of that within your classes in college?
And I went to CU Boulder too, one of the epicenters of this whole movement. And they did not mention it one time, or at least one time that I remembered, but nothing. And so it was just, I remember sitting there when I was first scrolling through and like, this has to be fake. And then I started looking, I went to PubMed, 2,200 articles on this, started paging through those, and everything just lined up and made sense. And, between, the momentum that the website was building with CBDistillery, and at the same time learning about, something that it felt like I was discovering something when that's not the case at all. But to myself, I'm going, God, people just don't know. If people knew what the endocannabinoid system was all about and how CBD interacted with it and other cannabinoids, it's going to be absolutely groundbreaking. And, that's kind of the battle that we've been fighting every day since, is how do we educate those consumers that this is more than just, weed light. This is really something that your body needs.
Yeah, you're not the only one who's gone through that discovery. I mean, even myself, I've been a user of THC and an advocate for many years, over 15 years. But when you really start to look at the science behind these cannabinoids and what they can do in terms of addressing ailments or different pain points and that you have, it's really quite fascinating. And I recently had on Dale Hunt, the founder and CEO of Breeders Best, and really his viewpoint is the future of medicine is cannabinoids, because it's going to be in a way where we can develop and create these cannabinoids in a way that, again, marry with those receptors, and we really start to pinpoint certain things that we can address with the cannabinoids.
Absolutely. Yeah, we speaking of specific cannabinoids, we just came out with a CBN product, and that has done really well for us, and we're getting great consumer feedback. Again, it's just taking CBD, and we have a certain number of our customers that are really educated with cannabinoids, and others that are brand new to it. And so the ones that are brand new tend to stick to the CBD products. But you'll start to see, CBN, we have a CBG, and we'll have some other cannabinoid products coming out shortly. And it's, like you said, you can really dial in the use. So sleep for CBN, inflammation for CBG. And it's been really cool to see. And that's something that, we're going to continue to do.
And when you say that, you mean like just further researching even new cannabinoids that have not been discovered yet, and adding that to your product line.
Right. Yeah, doing that. And then you have to obviously do the safety studies behind everything before you push it out to the population. But then, it's the future, as Dale was saying.
Sure. Well, and so you mentioned 2016, you were introduced to the CBD world, and that $100,000 revenue number is insane. Did you say that was over a course of a week or a weekend?
Sorry, that was one weekend. It was a Black Friday weekend. These guys, and most of them are still with us. They were doing extraction at the time, and they were just giving it to friends and family. They also owned a marijuana logistics business that was really their baby that they took care of, and on the side they were extracting the CBD for friends and family. Well, they had too much. They had an oversupply, so they said, let's try and sell it online. And so they put up probably took them 15 minutes, a Shopify website. And then one of the original team was he had a big, like a 3,000 person Instagram following, so not huge, and just said, hey, we're putting up this CBD if anybody wants it. And boom, it kind of went all over Reddit. And we put up a third-party test results, and we're the first ones to do that. And so just really transparent, had an accessible price point, And yeah, it's you talk to the founder on the other side of this wall here, Andy Pillion, and he'll say it was the best weekend of his life, followed by the worst 3 weeks of his life trying to get all those orders out the door.
It's like a catch 22. It's a good problem to have, but logistically, it sounds like a nightmare if you're not prepared for it.
Exactly.
That's funny. Well, I asked that question because obviously since then, since 2016, we've seen the market flooded with CBD, right? I mean, even here in Texas, due to the 2018 Farm Bill, now that every state can mass cultivate and produce hemp, right? And they're extracting those cannabinoids out of the hemp plant. How does your company differentiate itself and stand out with over 3,000 companies occupying the space?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost, it's the safety profile, and that's sometimes hard to get across to consumers. But we're the only company that we're aware of that's done self-affirmed GRAS, which is generally recognized as safe. You have to spend a ton of money, and you basically get your products put through a panel of independent toxicologists to say that it's safe. We've done that for our isolate products, our full spectrum, our broad spectrum. We have NSF, CGMP, so the highest standards for manufacturing and extraction that you can have. And we have a large quality team as well. So you can get a safe and consistent product with us. That's some of the things that we see that's problematic from the industry, is that there's all these little regional brands, and some of them are doing it right, but some of them aren't. And there's no quality component. They may have bought overstock. They haven't done the safety studies behind it. That's something you get with CBDistillery. Then the other thing is our price point. Compared to our large competitors, Charlotte's Web and some others, we do sit at kind of a lower value price point. And we run a lot of sales as well, just trying to fulfill our vision as a company, which is to get CBD or cannabinoids to the masses through the CBD movement. So trying to always work on ways to get the most accessible price point as well, and that's different for us. You'll also find a wide variety of products. We have a ton of different SKUs, all the way from, like I said, we have isolate, broad spectrum, and full spectrum. It works for and against us. It's kind of confusing to the consumer, but we offer them all, and different form factors.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up the full spectrum, broad spectrum, and isolate, because I noticed when I was on your website, you did touch on earlier that education is important, and that the consumer understands what these cannabinoids are and what they do, right? And on your website, I was impressed with the fact that you showcased what broad spectrum, full spectrum, and isolate even mean, right? Because I think that some companies tend to assume that the consumer knows, just because they're so close to it and they live it every day. But the fact that you're putting that stuff out there and making it easily understandable is great.
Yeah, it's my dad, who's I talk to every week, still has questions when he's on the website. I'm like, oh, that's not a good sign. We gotta somehow make that more user friendly and educate consumers on those the three different form factors. But there is distinct differences between all three. And something we'll continue to try and kind of push to the consumer, especially new consumers, that we're trying to drive trial and open up this life-changing product to them. We really need to get that across, what the differences are, what the kind of the dosages, recommended dosages are as well, and form factors.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier your product line in different SKUs that you have available. And so how are you sourcing those products? Are you cultivating yourselves, or you guys have strategic partners where you're white labeling services?
Yeah, so we actually, we don't own any farms or extraction right now. We go to the farm and we buy from multiple farms. We super sack everything up, so put it all in a big sack, lock it all up and put trackers in there, and then we actually transport that to an extraction partner, a CGMP extraction partner that's an ex-pharmaceutical company that does our extraction, and then we bring it all back to our manufacturing facility here in southern Denver to to put it into products. We do a little bit of contract manufacturing from here and there. If they're newer products, make sure that it gets some momentum, and then we bring it all in house into our NSF CGMP manufacturing facility.
Got you. Okay. And when it comes to CBD legislation, I know that, like, we're still waiting on the FDA's guidelines in terms of messaging and how you should position CBD from a health claim standpoint and whatnot. So how do y'all view the current legislation, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities you see in the future?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's really hard to say when the legislation will be passed. We sit on the executive board for the hemp roundtable. We're very active in the lobbying and trying to educate the Hill on what CBD is and how beneficial it is. Maybe something happens next year. Maybe it's another year. It's crazy that nothing's happened yet. We are part of a liver toxicity study, us, Charlotte's Web, and a few others that the FDA is aware of. That's one of their big gating items is checking the boxes. There's no elevated liver enzymes. And that study was delayed a bit, but it should be wrapped up by the end of the year. We'll provide to them. That could be the catalyst that gets them comfortable. And so when you're talking about challenges and opportunities, it's a challenge every day because we're trying to run a business. I'm putting on my business cap now, and CEO cap is, we're trying to run this business with moving targets. What if the FDA does put regulation? What if it doesn't? What does the sales channels look like? Is retail really large now? Will it be large in the future? What does it do to e-commerce sales? What is the advent of Amazon? There's a million different questions. So that's probably the biggest struggle with it. The biggest opportunity is that there's a lot of companies out there. You mentioned it earlier. It's a very, very crowded space. Since the barrier to entry is very small, very small. And with
Sounds like fire alarms going off in there.
I was just gonna say, I'm sorry that I'm a little distracted. I got something going off out there. Okay, I think it stopped now.
Okay, yeah, there you go. All right.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, you're.
So there's an opportunity because we have all these 3,000 brands out there, and it's got to be close to 95%. And I'm pulling that number out of thin air, but at least 95% that aren't complying by dietary supplement guidelines, and we are. And so that's an opportunity for us for when FDA does put regulation. People will still get away with selling it online, even if they're not complying by those laws. It'll be hard for the FDA to catch up with all of them. But for the mass retailers, we can be a great partner to them because we're a turnkey solution because of that safety. And again, we're not the only ones that have that and are ready, but it is an opportunity for companies like us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you say that example of those moving targets, and from a business standpoint, you really want to make sure that you're addressing each of those. It sounds like what y'all are doing is anticipating those regulations and that legislation to come. So you're just being prepared for it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my job every day is just placing chips on red and black, and I'm at the roulette table every day, trying to figure out which bet's going to win and which one's not, because it's all about anticipation. And when you're dealing with the government trying to regulate, and we need to potentially push legislation through to push the FDA to put in regulation, there's just no certainty in it.
Any predictions in terms of however the presidential election turns out, which side wins? Do you foresee any federal legalization happening soon, or?
Yeah, it's just my personal opinion is that a Biden administration would push it through quicker. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, full legalization of THC2 is positive for us, because one of the biggest things that we struggle with every day is destigmatizing the plant.
Mm-hmm.
Especially our demographic is 45 plus, and some of them accept it. Some of them simply think that it's still going to get them high and that it's a banned substance and all that. So you got to get them over that chasm, which is difficult.
So yeah, and that's a good point you raise, and we're always going back to that education factor. And so, in addition to that example that I shared about your website and how you do a great job of visually explaining, say full spectrum, broad spectrum, isolate. What else are y'all doing to educate your customers? I mean, is there speaking engagements or different things that you have available? Any like materials for them that they can?
Yeah, I mean, I won't get into all of it because we do a ton around education. That's one of the strategic pillars of our company. I'll say from a consumer standpoint, we try and produce as much blog content as possible and invite experts in to discuss. We have our hands tied a little bit from time to time with just what we can say and what we can't because of the FDA. So I think the blog content is really strong. We have a great workflow for our email campaigns. So it introduces people, new users to CBD and explains the endocannabinoid system and, how much other users may use, how much they should consider using. And then on the retail side, we engage with a group called Expert Voice, where they can actually, people who work in retail can go on and watch these educational videos and actually get free product and discounts. They're incentivized to do so, but watch these educational videos so they can then pass it along to the consumer.
That's great. So it sounds like you're really weighing heavily on the marketing, on the content side, excuse me. So
Yep.
you mentioned blogs, videos, things like that. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's really obviously the aim and the mission of this podcast is to have experts on like yourself who are in it on the front lines to really share that expertise and knowledge around the plant, and while sharing the benefits, and all the potential that it has from both a health perspective and an economic perspective. And so speaking of the wellness side of it, like, because you've been in the space since 2016, what have you seen since then, and how has the perception of CBD and wellness changed or not changed?
Yeah, I think how it's changed is it and I mentioned this earlier, so I won't belabor this, but it started with just CBD and people just seeing the wellness benefits. Obviously, there was a lot of news and news stories around it, how it, with GW Pharmaceutical and what it really does for children with seizures. And then it's really evolved to today, and the future is going to be more around, like you said, those minor cannabinoids and really dialing those in to get specific on, CBD can be a daily wellness product. It's kind of overall, it helps, bring you back to homeostasis. But if you're wanting to dial in sleep, I know I keep on going to that with CBN, that cannabinoid can really, really help you with an all natural sleep aid.
What I've noticed is, yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and what I've also seen is the over marketing of CBD in a way that it's not staying true to actually what the cannabinoid does. So, for instance, like putting it in energy drinks and marketing it in a way where it's misleading. And a lot of that has to do, like we talked about earlier, the competition, right? I mean, there's so many players in the game now that eventually those companies will be weeded out. But it seems like it'd be a challenge, especially when you're trying to educate your consumers.
Absolutely. I mean, at one of the trade shows we were at last year, the winner for best CBD product was awarded to a CBD pillow. I'm like, all right, well, knock that off the budget for trade show next year because we're not going back there. But that's,
Save that money. You could put that to better use, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's funny. Well, it's funny. When we talk about the marketing side, I attended my first hemp convention in January before COVID hit in Texas, and their hashtag was THC 2020. It's like, guys, like, you're not helping anybody here by doing that. So,
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, yeah, that's what we want to get out of the product, but keep the same benefits. Yeah.
right. So I was presented with some of your background, and I noticed that your goal is to continue the growth of the house of brands and becoming the largest supplier of hemp-derived CBD and other cannabinoids in the world. So, from a forward, future-looking standpoint, how do you intend to do that?
Yeah, without getting too much in the weeds, I've talked a lot about innovation. That's going to be really important to us, is continuing to innovate and then back it up with clinical and safety studies. So we provide good products, innovative products that you can't find other places. Everybody can spin up a CBD product right now. Everybody can't do a CBN, a CBG, and some of the other minor cannabinoids. The other thing that's going to be really important to us moving forward, and has been since the very beginning, is our pricing, and just making sure that we come at an accessible price. We originally used affordable. There's hardly any CBD out there that I would call affordable. Right now, we understand that it's a fairly a premium, just like any market that will start to come back down. And we really want to be kind of at the forefront of that, making sure that users get accessible CBD.
That makes sense. Yeah. At a fair price, right?
At a fair price, exactly. And that's what we're working on every day, to try and dial up efficiencies within the business, get better suppliers. I won't get into the details here, but trying to lower those costs, our input costs, so we can pass that along to the consumer.
So I recently stepped in this space. I launched a brokerage firm here in Texas, and I'm bringing this up because I've noticed that there's really, and it varies by state, is that the pricing is not stable, right? It's insane. Like, you could pay $600 a pound or $504 a pound for CBG, and then CBD could range from 300 to 700. And it's just, are you noticing that also?
Yes, and it's been like that for probably the last year, especially around CBD isolate, that went from $12,000 to right now you can get it for $500 a kilogram. I was just talking to one of our sourcing guys earlier today. We were talking about the price of this crude oil, and it fluctuated. He rattled off 5 different bids that he got, and they were all double, triple. Like it was all over the board. There is, like you said, zero consistency, and it's nobody's really held to be honest and accountable on any of their dealings. And on top of that, one of the drivers here is that hemp was so overproduced last year, kind of after the 2018 Farm Bill, like the influx of CBD brands. Hemp production was 10 times that. And so the market's just flooded. And so all of a sudden you could get, somebody with a 1,000-acre farm. A 1,000-acre farm could satisfy our entire business for 2 years. And we're, a top 5 CBD company. That will just flood the market one day, and they'll finally say, you know what, this isn't going to come back. Prices aren't going to come back for 3 or 4 years, so I'm just going to flood the market. And so then it fluctuates. It's crazy. And again, another one of those moving targets that we're trying to operate through as a business.
Yeah, and to add on to that, another driver I'd say would be the infrastructure, right? I mean, there's not enough processing labs to get that crude oil and that distillate, right?
Yeah, there's not enough that have relationships with large CBD companies that they can actually get it through. And what I mean by that is a bunch of extractors, where the extraction companies came about, a year, 2 years ago, because they were all raising money on these pro formas that said you could get, you could produce a kilogram of CBD isolate for this cost, and you can sell it for this. So just huge margins. So they all flooded. But then what we're seeing is a big shakeout there because, great, they can go buy from a farmer, but they can't sell it to anybody.
Right.
And so there's actually a lot that are going out of business right now, unfortunately, in that extraction space.
Well, that's one thing that I'm learning just getting into the space is making sure that those contracts are in place, right? Because like you mentioned earlier, it's so easy to produce and grow, but if you don't have buyers and you don't have a way of processing, then you're going to run into a lot of issues.
Yeah, I mean, there's garages full of this crude oil worth at one point millions of dollars that they could sell for, not a lot right now. Now the problem is with a lot of that is that these extractors weren't CGMP. So like for companies like us and a lot of the big ones, we can't even buy that crude oil and then, like I said, lower our prices to the consumer. We just can't do it right now because it was processed in an extraction facility that wasn't CGMP.
And
So it has our hands tied.
what is that CPMG?
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. It's just good manufacturing process. So it's it's a very global term for being compliant. You have organizations that come out and audit you a few times a year. Just make sure you have the right quality system, that your products are trackable. So if they're, God forbid, a problem, you could track it, make sure that you have a consistent product, make sure you're testing it throughout the process. There wasn't, now there's probably two handfuls of extractors that are CGMP or NSF CGMP, which is kind of a higher distinction of CGMP now, but that's not the case for all the rest.
Right. So they're in limited quantity is what you're saying. You really have to build those relationships with those certified labs to do that.
Yep.
Got you. Well, Chase, we've covered a lot. Is there anything else that you want to cover and talk about before we end?
No, I'm good. I appreciate you having me on. It's like I said before we started this, really enjoy these conversations. So appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate having you on. And go ahead, and I'll give you the opportunity to plug any social media or websites for people to find your company and your product.
Yeah, our number one brand, our workhorse, the one that I spoke to most of this conversation is CBDistillery. It's www.cbdistillery.com. Go on there, you're going to see a lot of different products. Like you said, a lot of different educational material. We run great promotions, and again, we're really driven as a company to fulfill our vision of the CBD movement, getting accessible CBD to everybody.
Well, that's a great mission to have, and there's sure a lot of consumers that appreciate that. So thanks again for your time, Chase, and I look forward to having you on again real soon, all right?
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, and thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.